From their time in the American Basketball Association as the New Jersey Americans to a stint on Long Island to moving back to New Jersey and now to Brooklyn, the Nets have had their fair share of memorable moments in New York sports. But which four players in the franchise's history belong on our Mount Postmore? Dexter Henry and Brian Lewis discuss.
Today we're going to talk about the Brooklyn Nets, and joining me to do that is the fantastic beat reporter for the Brooklyn Nets, longtime friend, my guy Brian Lewis. Brian, what's going on, man?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good
Now,
to be here.
you had to come up with your Mount Postmore for the Nets. How did you find this experience? Was this challenging at all? How did you find this experience?
Well, I mean, two of them were pretty obvious.
Yeah.
The third I thought was reasonably clear. I did find the pick for the fourth head to go up there on Mount Postmore kind of challenging. And I'm sure it's probably open for conversation and debate, and that's what we do. That's the beauty of sports, right?
That is the beauty of sports. Okay, I want to talk about your picks in particular, in the ones that you said were pretty obvious, and I happen to agree. I think people will know that it's going to be the great Julius Erving, Dr. J, and it's also going to be Jason Kidd. Now, I always have to acknowledge, I don't want to bring age into this, but some of our viewers may not have seen either of those guys play. Why were both of those men so impactful to the Nets franchise?
Oh, goodness. Well, Dr. J was impactful not just to the Nets franchise. He was impactful just in basketball culture.
Yeah.
Pride of Long Island, I mean, he basically invented the posterization. His flair, his tendency to the dramatic, his dunks, people were emulating him all over the country. I would also contend that he would have changed the direction of the entire organization had he stayed with the Nets through the NBA. He was the star power that helped drive the NBA-ABA merger. That's how spectacular he was. Yeah. People that didn't see him, you guys missed a treat. He was special. Literally a one of one, and people throw that term around a lot, but he really was.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most amazing what ifs would have been if the Nets' financial situation hadn't forced them to sell his contract to Philadelphia, because they immediately went from winning back-to-back ABA titles to being the worst team in the NBA in their first season when they sold him. And of course, Julius goes on to win with the Sixers and went into the Hall of Fame as a Sixer, and the rest is history.
Yeah, it's almost like sometimes he's forgotten as a Net, right? Like if you look at it through the
Sure.
major NBA lens, he's kind of forgotten as a Net. And the other guy I just mentioned that I agree with you that is obvious here is Jason Kidd. Now, you and I, before we just started recording this, you said something to me and I was like, damn, that's a really good point. And that's Jason Kidd coming to the Nets, probably one of the most impactful, if not most impactful acquisitions via trade in the NBA in the last, 25, 30 years?
25 years. I certainly can't remember one. Jason, and this goes to a conversation that hopefully we'll have about the fourth pick, but Jason, obviously he was available because of some of his behavior in Phoenix.
Right.
I cannot discuss this without acknowledging that.
Have to have that in the context, right.
However, the Nets were a wretched team when they got him. I think they won 26 games. Rod Thorne trades for him, and Jason stands up at a team dinner for training camp, tells everybody, I don't care what happened before. The losing ends now. And he was talking about making the playoffs. He even underestimated his own impact because they immediately go to back-to-back NBA finals. The only finals in the NBA that they've ever been to.
Right.
And he made them a fast break must-watch. It was must-watch cinema every single time he was on the court. So he completely changed the trajectory of the franchise.
Yeah, and the guys we're talking about, the first two that were obvious for Brian and myself, their numbers are both up in the rafters at the Barclays Center. And that leads us to the third guy that you had, whose number just went up this past season, in the rafters at the Barclays Center, and that's Vince Carter. Another trade acquisition by the Nets that was pretty damn impactful. Why was he on your list? Everybody knows him as Vinsanity. I think a lot of people think of him first for his air-defying acts in Toronto, but it's a really, really, really good net, right?
Oh, he was. Yeah, I mean, he played 22 years, and of all of those various stops, his highest average was with the Nets, 23.6.
Yep.
He was the most spectacular dunker that you'd ever want to see. So again, I go back, if Dr. J invented posterization, this man perfected it.
Perfected, I like that.
And I don't think anybody would argue with that, especially not Alonzo Mourning after he put him on the poster.
Alonzo Mourning might see this and be like, why you got to bring up old stuff, man? Why you got to bring up old stuff? No, you're right, he did put him on the poster, but go ahead, sorry.
So I think Vince, and again, you're correct when you point out that was, again, by Rod Thorne, one of the most lopsided trades you could ever want to see. He gave up very little to Toronto to get him, and immediately, Vince, for the rest of that season, was as good as anybody in the league that season. So yes, spectacular dunker, legitimate star power, and overall unstoppable offensive threat. Man, there was no question that he was going to be on the Mount Rushmore for the Nets.
All right, so no question. I would like to know, I did my own Mount Rushmore, and I was with Brian on these three guys. Here's where we differ. Here's where we might have some debate, some friendly debate, you might say. Your fourth, which you said was not tough, but it was a challenging decision for you.
It was.
To make here. And there's a bunch of places I think people could go with players. Brook Lopez.
Certainly.
Going to be a candidate for his longevity. Buck Williams.
Absolutely.
Up there with Nets all-time leading rebounder.
Brook is their all-time
Brook's
leading
all-time
scorer,
Yep.
and Buck is their all-time leading rebounder. And in games played,
Yep.
and in buckets, and in offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, total rebounds, fouls, everything.
So you got all that.
Yeah.
But Brian did not go with either of those guys, who I think could be mixed. Some people may want to add, you think about Richard Jefferson. You brought up, I'm going to save this, another name you brought up for me that's not a player that I thought was really good, so we'll get to that before we wrap. But you went with Drazen Petrovic.
Yes.
Who I would say, Brian, undoubtedly, if you love basketball, one of the most impactful players in the last 30 to 35 years. I don't think people understand enough of his impact.
Sure.
Easily one of the most impactful European players in that time, right? There is no Dirk without what we saw from Drazen Petrovic. There's no Luka without what we saw from Drazen Petrovic. So I want to make that very clear. But people, I think, might push back a little bit and say, hey, Brian, I know you know basketball, but his career tragically was short.
It was 28 years old.
So tell me why Drazen Petrovic was number 4 for you on Mount Rushmore, the guy you picked, and does a lot of it have to do with impact?
It does. I think, generally speaking, we are looking at their impact with the Nets, or their impact with the franchise, with New Jersey, if somebody had actually risen to the occasion in Brooklyn. Drazen has an impact on the game. He has an impact throughout Europe, particularly Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe.
A lot of the players that we see coming into the league now, we don't even think about the fact that they're European. We really don't. Hey, you look at where's the flag next to their name, and that's fine. It's become commonplace.
Yep.
Trust me when I tell you, for the younger fans that may not appreciate this, it was not commonplace when Drazen was playing.
No.
This guy was a standard bearer. This was not normal for players to come from Europe and have the kind of success, the kind of chutzpah, or whatever you want to call it, that he had. He was utterly fearless, even in the face of Michael Jordan, was not intimidated. And to this day, his three-point shooting is still, I think, 4th all-time career in the NBA. He kind of opened the door for a lot of the guys that came after him And a lot of young European players started to look at him and say, well, if he can do it, maybe I can do it if I work hard. So his impact, fine. Unfortunately, tragically, his career was cut short by a fatal car accident, age of 28 in Germany. But his impact is larger and broader than New Jersey. His impact is on the culture of the game all throughout Europe, and what we see now with a lot of the international players coming into the league. That's why I think he deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore.
I like that point. I think impact does matter. I think something you said there about his fearlessness, you think about him as a player, like, man, he would have really killed in today's NBA if he was allowed to shoot more threes, because he was so efficient from downtown. He could handle the ball. He could score off the dribble. He was a really good. Kids, if you haven't watched some Drazen Petrovic highlights, I know some of you might think it's old, some early 90s basketball. Go out and watch some. Drazen Petrovic was that dude.
Yes.
You also then said to me, and so I want to let people get a little bit of a peek inside what your decision was like, because you also considered a non-player here. And I should note that everybody who Brian has on his Mount Rushmore for the Nets, Mount Postmore, sorry, for the Nets, all their jerseys are up in the rafters at the Barclays Center. You can go and see all the jerseys up in the rafters. But you mentioned somebody who wasn't a player that I thought was really good, and that was Rod Thorn.
Yes.
Rod Thorn, former vice president of basketball operations for the Nets, or president of basketball operations for the Nets.
Yes.
Why'd you have Rod Thorn as strong consideration to be on the Mount Postmore for the Nets?
Yes. If I hadn't picked Petro, I would have picked Rod Thorn. Rod was working in the NBA offices when the Nets won the lottery. All right. Them having the number one pick was what they used to lure Rod Thorn. Rod came in and promptly made the most lopsided trade of the last quarter century, 3 decades, bringing in Kidd. Now, again, Stephon Marbury, great player, great entertainer, wonderful to watch, wizard with the ball. But him being able to get Jason Kidd, you are trading a spectacular player for a guy who completely changes the trajectory of your entire franchise and brings you to NBA Finals consecutively in his first 2 years.
It's crazy.
That is as impactful a trade as we've seen 25, 30 years. He backs that up with an encore of getting Vince Carter from Toronto for next to nothing. Next to nothing. So I would contend, if I weren't putting Petro in, certainly Rod is deserving of being on their Mount Rushmore. And if we weren't doing a Mount Rushmore, if we were doing a starting five most impactful, Rod definitely would have made my list.
So here's the official Mount Postmore for the Nets. Julius, Dr. J. Irving, Jason Kidd, Brooke Lopez, and Vince Carter. But we want to hear from you guys. You agree with the list? Who should be on your Mount Rushmore for the Nets? We have lots more teams to go, so make sure you subscribe to Sports Plus to get full access to this series.